In the private archives of the Winchester Historical Society, stored in a temperature-controlled vault beneath the main library, lies a family photograph that has puzzled researchers for over a century. The image, captured in the summer of 1919, shows what appears to be a portrait of domestic bliss. Charles and Eleanor Morrison standing in their parlor, proudly displaying their infant son, Thomas, who had been born just 6 months earlier. The photograph was taken by a traveling photographer named Frederick Hayes, who specialized in family portraits for the emerging middle class of post-war America. The Morrison family home, located on Elm Street in the quiet town of Millfield, represented the American dream realized. Charles had returned from the Great War with his health intact and had successfully established a small but profitable furniture business. Eleanor, a former schoolteacher, had embraced her role as wife and mother with the dedication expected of women in her social circle. Their home was modest but well appointed, filled with the latest conveniences and decorated in the popular arts and crafts style of the period. The photograph itself appears unremarkable at first examination. Charles Morrison stands tall and proud, his hand resting protectively on his wife's shoulder. He wears a dark suit appropriate for Sunday service, his hair neatly parted and his expression serious but content. Eleanor sits in a carved wooden chair, her infant son cradled in her arms, wearing a white christening gown that had been handmade by her mother. Her dress is modest and elegant, her hair arranged in the Gibson Girl style that had remained fashionable throughout the decade. The parlor setting speaks of middle-class prosperity and good taste. Heavy curtains frame tall windows, allowing natural light to illuminate the scene. A Persian rug covers the hardwood floor, and carefully selected furniture pieces demonstrate the family's appreciation for quality craftsmanship. On the mantelpiece, family photographs and decorative objects create an atmosphere of established domesticity. Most prominent in the background of the composition stands an ornate mirror with an elaborate gilded frame, positioned to reflect the family group from a slightly different angle. This mirror, a wedding gift from Eleanor's parents, measures nearly 4 feet in height and represents one of the most expensive furnishings in the Morrison home. The photographer had positioned his subjects to take advantage of the mirror's reflection, creating a sense of depth and visual interest that elevated the portrait above typical amateur photography. Dr. Patricia Whitman, a specialist in early 20th century photography and American social history, first encountered this photograph in 2017 while researching family life in the immediate aftermath of World War I. Her initial interest focused on the material culture visible in such images, using family photographs to understand how returning soldiers and their families constructed new identities in the post-war period. However, what she discovered in the Morrison family portrait would fundamentally alter her understanding of both photography and the hidden complexities of family life. Using high-resolution digital scanning technology, Dr. Whitman began examining the photograph with microscopic detail, analyzing everything from clothing styles to furniture placement to understand the social and economic status of the Morrison family. It was during this detailed examination that she noticed something extraordinary about the mirror's reflection, something that had remained invisible to casual observers for nearly a century. While the main photograph showed baby Thomas as a normal, healthy infant, with the cherubic features typical of 6-month-old children, the mirror's reflection revealed something entirely different. In the reflected image, the baby's eyes appeared to glow with an unnatural light, creating an effect that seemed to emanate from within rather than being caused by external illumination. More disturbing still was the infant's expression, which appeared far more mature and calculating than any baby should possess. Dr. Whitman initially assumed she was observing a photographic anomaly, perhaps caused by the interaction between the camera's flash powder and the mirror's silvered surface. Early photography was notorious for producing unexpected visual effects, and she had encountered numerous examples of supposed supernatural phenomena that proved to have purely technical explanations. However, as she subjected the image to increasingly sophisticated analysis, this rational explanation began to crumble. The photograph had been taken using standard techniques for the period, with magnesium flash powder providing illumination in the relatively dim parlor setting. The exposure time was brief enough to prevent motion blur, and the focus was sharp throughout the composition. Most importantly, the lighting appeared consistent across the entire image, with no signs of unusual reflections or optical distortions that might explain the anomalous appearance of the baby in the mirror. Further analysis revealed that the glowing effect in the baby's eyes was not caused by reflected light, but appeared to be an internal luminescence captured by the photographic emulsion. The chemical composition of the photograph showed no signs of manipulation or double exposure, and the grain structure was uniform throughout the image. Whatever had caused the strange appearance of the baby in the mirror had been present at the moment the photograph was taken. Determined to understand the circumstances surrounding this disturbing image, Dr. Whitman began investigating the history of the Morrison family. What she uncovered was a story that challenged her assumptions about post-war domestic life and revealed dark currents flowing beneath the surface of apparent normalcy. Charles Morrison had indeed served in the Great War, but his military record contained details that painted a very different picture from the heroic veteran suggested by the family photograph. He had been assigned to a unit that specialized in what military documents euphemistically called special reconnaissance, work that involved infiltrating enemy positions and gathering intelligence through methods that violated conventional rules of warfare. Dr. Whitman discovered that Charles had been present at several locations where military historians had documented unusually high numbers of civilian casualties, incidents that official records attributed to enemy action, but which contemporary accounts suggested might have involved Allied units operating without official sanction. More disturbing were medical records indicating that Charles had been treated for what military physicians described as nervous exhaustion, a condition that modern psychiatrists would recognize as severe post-traumatic stress disorder. The medical files, obtained through a Freedom of Information request, revealed that Charles had experienced episodes of violent behavior and had reported persistent nightmares about events he claimed never to remember upon waking. Military physicians had noted his tendency toward dissociation and his apparent ability to compartmentalize traumatic memories to an unusual degree. He had been discharged from service 6 months earlier than originally scheduled, officially for medical reasons, but with notations suggesting that his commanding officers had concerns about his psychological stability. Eleanor Morrison's background proved equally complex upon investigation. While public records supported her identity as a former schoolteacher, Dr. Whitman discovered that she had been dismissed from her position at Millfield Elementary School under circumstances that had been carefully concealed from the community. School board minutes archived in the town clerk's office revealed that Eleanor had been accused of inappropriate methods of discipline and unusual behavior toward her students. The accusations had never been formally investigated, as Eleanor's resignation had prevented the need for a public hearing. However, statements from parents and fellow teachers, preserved in the school superintendent's private files, painted a picture of a woman whose behavior had become increasingly erratic during her final months of employment. Several parents had complained that their children had begun experiencing nightmares after spending time in Eleanor's classroom, and at least one teacher had reported seeing Eleanor engage in what she described as strange rituals during lunch periods when she believed herself to be unobserved. Most disturbing were accounts from former students, now adults, who had maintained consistent memories of Eleanor's classroom despite the passage of decades. These individuals, interviewed separately and without knowledge of each other's accounts, described remarkably similar experiences. Periods during which Eleanor would speak in voices that did not sound like her own, moments when her eyes would appear to change color in certain lighting conditions, and an overwhelming sense that something malevolent resided within their seemingly normal teacher. The investigation into baby Thomas Morrison revealed even more troubling information. Birth records indicated that Eleanor had experienced an unusually difficult pregnancy, marked by medical complications that her physician had been unable to explain. Dr. Samuel Blackwood, the attending physician, had left detailed notes describing symptoms that defied conventional medical understanding of prenatal development. According to Dr. Blackwood's records, Eleanor had reported feeling movement in her womb as early as 8 weeks into her pregnancy, far earlier than fetal movement typically becomes detectable. She had also experienced periods during which her body temperature would drop dramatically without apparent cause, and she had developed an aversion to sunlight so severe that she could only tolerate being outdoors during evening hours. Most puzzling were the physician's notes regarding the baby's development during the final months of pregnancy. Routine examinations had revealed that the fetus was growing at an accelerated rate and that its brain development appeared to be progressing far more rapidly than normal. Dr. Blackwood had also noted unusual activity patterns, with the baby seeming to be awake and moving almost constantly, even during periods when normal fetal behavior would suggest sleep. The birth itself had been traumatic in ways that extended beyond typical obstetric complications. Dr. Blackwood's confidential notes described a delivery that lasted nearly 36 hours, during which Eleanor had experienced periods of delirium in which she spoke in languages that neither she nor anyone present could identify. The baby had been born with eyes already open and had displayed motor coordination far exceeding normal newborn capabilities. Most disturbing of all was Dr. Blackwood's description of the infant's behavior immediately following birth. Rather than crying or sleeping as expected, baby Thomas had remained alert and watchful, his eyes tracking movement around the room with an intensity that the physician found deeply unsettling. The baby had also displayed an unusual aversion to being touched by anyone other than his mother, reacting with what Dr. Blackwood described as intelligent resistance rather than normal infant reflexes. Dr. Whitman's investigation revealed that the Morrison family's neighbors had noticed unusual occurrences beginning shortly after Thomas's birth. The Hendersons, who lived in the adjacent house, reported that their pets had begun behaving strangely whenever they ventured near the Morrison property. Dogs would refuse to walk past the house, and cats would arch their backs and hiss at seemingly empty air when in the vicinity of the Morrison yard. Mrs. Elizabeth Thompson, who had served as a midwife during Thomas's birth, had confided to her own family that she had never experienced anything like the Morrison delivery. According to her daughter's later testimony, Mrs. Thompson had described feeling as though she were assisting in the birth of something that was not entirely human, though she had been unable to articulate exactly what had given her this impression. The photographer who had taken the family portrait, Frederick Hayes, had left his own account of the session in his professional journals. Hayes had been documenting his work for potential inclusion in a photography manual, and his description of the Morrison portrait session contained details that Dr. Whitman found extremely significant. According to Hayes's notes, the family had insisted on multiple poses and had been particularly concerned about the positioning of the mirror in the background. They had specifically requested that the baby be visible in the mirror's reflection, a request that Hayes had found unusual but had accommodated. During the session, Hayes had noted that baby Thomas had remained remarkably still and alert, never crying or becoming fussy despite the bright flash powder and unfamiliar surroundings. Most importantly, Hayes had documented his own reaction upon developing the glass plate negative. He wrote, "Upon examining the developed image, I was startled to observe anomalies in the mirror's reflection that I had not noticed during the actual photography session. The infant's appearance in the reflected image differs significantly from his appearance in the main composition, displaying characteristics that I cannot adequately explain through normal photographic processes." Hayes had attempted to contact the Morrison family to discuss these anomalies, but his letters had gone unanswered. When he had visited their home several weeks later, he had found the house empty and had been informed by neighbors that the family had departed suddenly without providing forwarding information. The photographer had kept the glass plate negative as part of his professional collection, noting in his journal that it represented the most unusual and disturbing image I have ever captured. Dr. Whitman's research revealed that the Morrison family had indeed disappeared from Millfield in late 1919, just a few months after the portrait was taken. Property records showed that Charles had sold their home and business to a local buyer for significantly less than their estimated value, suggesting a need for immediate liquidity rather than careful financial planning. No forwarding address had been provided, and attempts to trace the family through banking records or postal forwarding services had proven unsuccessful. The house itself had acquired a disturbing reputation among subsequent occupants. The family who purchased the property from Charles Morrison had lasted less than 6 months before selling and relocating to another state. Their brief occupancy had been marked by reports of unexplained noises, sudden temperature fluctuations, and the persistent feeling of being watched by unseen presences. Over the following decades, the Morrison house had changed hands numerous times, with no family remaining in residence for more than 2 years. Each group of occupants had reported similar experiences: The sound of an infant crying in the middle of the night, despite the absence of any baby in the house, the appearance of unexplained shadows moving through rooms, and most disturbing of all, the occasional glimpse of figures in mirrors that did not correspond to anyone actually present in the room. Dr. Whitman's investigation took a personal turn when she began experiencing her own unusual reactions to prolonged study of the Morrison photograph. She documented increasing difficulty sleeping, persistent dreams featuring an infant with glowing eyes, and a growing obsession with understanding the true nature of baby Thomas Morrison. Most disturbing were moments when she would catch glimpses of movement in mirrors while working alone in her office, movements that seemed to correspond to the position of the baby in the photograph. The breakthrough in Dr. Whitman's research came when she discovered a connection between the Morrison family and a series of incidents that had occurred throughout New England during the late 1910s and early 1920s. Police records from multiple jurisdictions documented reports of families with young children who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances, leaving behind homes that subsequent occupants found difficult to inhabit. The pattern was remarkably consistent. A family with a recently born infant would establish themselves in a community, appear to live normal lives for several months, then suddenly vanish without explanation. In each case, the abandoned homes would acquire reputations for supernatural activity, and local residents would report encounters with entities that seemed to be connected to the missing families. Most significantly, Dr. Whitman discovered that several of these cases involved photographs taken shortly before the family's disappearances, photographs that displayed anomalies similar to those found in the Morrison portrait. In each instance, mirrors or reflective surfaces in the background revealed images that contradicted what appeared in the main composition, showing family members with characteristics that defied normal explanation. The investigation revealed that these families had all shared certain characteristics beyond their mysterious disappearances. The fathers had all served in the military during World War I and had been assigned to units involved in classified operations. The mothers had all worked in educational or childcare positions before marriage and had histories of unusual behavior that had attracted attention from their employers or communities. Most importantly, the children in these families had all displayed precocious development and behaviors that their communities had found disturbing. Dr. Whitman's research uncovered evidence suggesting that these families were not victims of supernatural phenomena, but were themselves the source of the disturbances that had plagued their communities. The war had apparently exposed certain individuals to influences or experiences that had fundamentally altered their nature, changes that were then passed on to their children in ways that transcended normal genetics or environment. The photographic anomalies appeared to be the result of the camera's ability to capture aspects of reality that were invisible to normal human perception. Just as some medical conditions could only be detected through specialized imaging techniques, the true nature of these families could only be revealed through the objective lens of the camera, which recorded light and shadow without the filtering effects of human consciousness. Baby Thomas Morrison, as revealed in the mirror's reflection, was not the innocent infant he appeared to be in the main photograph. The glowing eyes and mature expression captured in the reflected image suggested a consciousness that was far older and more sophisticated than any 6-month-old child should possess. The discrepancy between his appearance in the direct photograph and his reflection indicated that his physical form was somehow concealing his true nature. Dr. Whitman's final discovery came when she traced the Morrison family's movements after their departure from Millfield. Using census records, property transfers, and newspaper archives, she was able to follow their trail through several states over a period of nearly 2 decades. The pattern that emerged was both fascinating and terrifying. The Morrison family had continued to move from community to community, never staying in one location for more than a few years. In each place, they had established themselves as model citizens, contributing to local institutions and appearing to live exemplary lives. However, their presence had invariably been followed by a series of unexplained events. Children in the community would begin experiencing shared nightmares. Local animals would display unusual behavioral patterns, and sensitive individuals would report feeling an oppressive presence that seemed to emanate from the Morrison household. Most significantly, other families in these communities would begin to display changes similar to those that had affected the Morrisons themselves. Children would be born with unusual characteristics, Parents would develop strange behavioral patterns, and eventually some of these families would also disappear, continuing the cycle in new locations. Dr. Whitman realized that she had uncovered evidence of what could only be described as a form of supernatural contagion, a condition that spread through communities like a disease, but operated according to rules that defied scientific understanding. The Morrison family and others like them served as carriers of this influence, spreading it through their mere presence in a community while remaining largely unaware of their role in the process. The 1919 photograph served as a unique documentation of this phenomenon, capturing the moment when the transformation was still incomplete but already visible to the camera's objective eye. Baby Thomas's appearance in the mirror represented not what he was at the time the photograph was taken, but what he was becoming, or perhaps what had always been his true nature, temporarily concealed by the limitations of human perception. Whitman's investigation concluded with the sobering realization that the Morrison family and others like them might still be active in contemporary society, continuing to move from community to community and spreading their influence in ways that remained largely invisible to conventional observation. The photographic evidence suggested that the camera might be one of the few tools capable of detecting these entities, raising disturbing questions about how many similar families might exist undetected in modern communities. The Morrison photograph remains in the archives of the Winchester Historical Society, stored in a specially designed container that prevents direct viewing without protective equipment. Researchers who have examined the image report consistent experiences: an immediate sense of unease when viewing the mirror's reflection, persistent dreams featuring glowing-eyed children, and a growing conviction that they are being watched by unseen presences. Dr. Whitman's final report documenting her investigation was submitted to the Society for Psychical Research, but was never published in academic journals. The evidence she had gathered challenged too many fundamental assumptions about the nature of reality to be accepted by mainstream scholarship. However, her work has been preserved in private archives and continues to be studied by researchers who specialize in anomalous phenomena. The implications of Dr. Whitman's discoveries extend far beyond the single Morrison family photograph. If her theories are correct, cameras may possess the unique ability to perceive aspects of reality that remain hidden from human consciousness, serving as windows into layers of existence that overlap with our own, but remain largely invisible to normal perception. The mirror in the Morrison parlor, reflecting the true nature of baby Thomas while his physical form concealed it from direct observation, represents a perfect metaphor for the hidden complexities that may exist within seemingly normal families and communities. The photograph serves as a reminder that reality may be far more complex and dangerous than appearances suggest, and that the tools of modern technology might occasionally provide glimpses into truths that human consciousness is not equipped to perceive or understand. In the end, the Morrison family portrait stands as one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for the existence of supernatural phenomena that has ever been documented. The camera, designed to capture light and preserve moments in time, appears to have accomplished something far more significant. It revealed the presence of entities that exist among us while remaining largely invisible to human perception. Entities that may continue to influence our world in ways that we are only beginning to understand. The baby's glowing eyes staring out from the mirror's reflection across more than a century serve as a permanent reminder that some truths are too disturbing for human consciousness to accept, but too important to be completely ignored. The photograph endures as both historical document and supernatural warning, preserving evidence of mysteries that may never be fully explained, but which continue to shape our world in ways we cannot comprehend.